Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz at Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Tuesday. It means we're brought to you by Daryl May of Trusty Properties. Got Jordan Kitchens, Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos. Fired up you are with us today. We got a lot to do over the course of the next couple of hours. Joe Burrow and Jayden Daniels on display last night for Monday Night Football. Kind of. It was football. It was on Monday night. Score didn't really matter, and they didn't play all that much. But they were out there last night. I want to talk about those two guys. Glen West of 24/7 Sports going to join us at 1:30 as he always does to talk Tigers. Auburn's claiming national titles. We'll talk about it. Mike Rodak probably has a word to say about that. He covers the Alabama Crimson Tide for 24/7 Sports. He's going to be with us at 2 o'clock to talk about Ty Simpson being named the starting quarterback in Tuscaloosa. Jam Miller, running back's going to miss a little bit of time. They got a big opener against Florida State as well, so I want to hear about year two under Kalen DeBoer, and we'll hear about that from Mike Rodak at 2 o'clock. Should LSU and Tulane play? Tulane thinks so. I'll talk about it in the second hour, and Sharif Ishak talking some Saints at 2:30. So we are jam-packed for the next 2 hours. Lock us in. Let's crank it up the way we do every day with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's opening drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
Brian Kelly just met with the media about an hour ago and discussed myriad topics of the day as LSU continues to prep for Clemson. Very quickly on the injury front, and then we'll get into the meat of the offensive line, but I do want to pass along some news for those that missed this. Whit Weeks has not practiced the last few days. Did not practice on Friday, did not practice on Monday when the media was out there. He was asked, why did that happen? Simply said, load management. We're just not going to overload Whit at this point. I'm fine with that. That's actually the reason. And Whit's at practice. He had his helmet on Monday, tennis shoes, jersey, observing, in good spirits. I think they're just taking things easy with Whit Weeks. That's fine with me. He's got a surgically repaired leg. Don't want to put more strain on it than you need to over the course of a very hot month that includes a lot of physical play. Okay, that's fine. So I'm good with that. Harold Perkins was not at practice on Monday at all. We didn't see him anywhere in the facility. He was asked why. Personal day. Had to, quote-unquote, take care of some things. He was back out there today at practice. No issues there. And the last note was on Michael Van Buren. LSU's backup quarterback was seen with some tape on his throwing hand. Brian Kelly just said, just jammed his index finger there. No issue. He went through some light throwing. They're going to put some more light throwing on him this afternoon, and he should be ready to go for tomorrow's practice. So, not ideal that your quarterback had a little hand injury, but certainly not anything significant. Michael Van Buren will have missed the last couple of days. Colin Hurley was taking the second-team reps. All should be good there. In totality, and I don't think I'm jinxing anything. I don't need to knock on a bunch of wood or anything. Like, I'm just stating the very obvious. LSU has managed workloads very strategically. They have not exceeded 2 hours at practice. They've done some work inside. They've had recovery days when they have a physical day, the day before and after they take some time off their feet. And LSU right now is very healthy moving forward into camp. Again, I don't think that's some sort of wild jinxing statement. It's just stating a fact. We're at practice a few times a week. I don't see a lot of red no-contact jerseys. In fact, none on the players that aren't the quarterbacks. And they feel like they've gotten work done, but have done so in a smart manner, if you will. And it appears that way. So no significant updates on those guys, just your normal camp stuff. Day off here, bump and bruise here, personal day off here. Everybody appears to be moving forward this week. So that was the news on attendance and the issues off the field. Let's talk about on the field offensive line. The story yesterday when we went to practice was very clearly that you were seeing shakeup on the offensive line. Paul Mabinga and DJ Chester rotating at left guard. Mabinga was getting more of the first-team reps. And then you saw Carius Kern, who had been almost exclusively at left tackle, moving to the right side to compete with Weston Davis over there. They both worked with the first team on Monday, and you feel like that competition is ongoing. Well, Brian Kelly was asked about it today, and we didn't have time to cut that audio up, but I've got all the quotes right here. And this is what Brian Kelly said in regards to the entirety of the offensive line. Tyree is going to be our starting left tackle, meaning Tyree Adams. We knew that. Okay. I think there's still a battle between Paul and Cohen for one of the guard positions. That's Paul Mabinga and Cohen Eccles. Now, Cohen Eccles usually plays right guard when we watch, but they're suggesting potentially Paul Mabinga and Cohen Eccles competing at left guard. Thompson has nailed down one of the guard positions. Braylon has nailed down the center position, and I think there's still a battle for that next tackle position. So to pare that down and say it a little bit more succinctly, Tyree Adams left tackle, Braylon Moore center, Josh Thompson right guard. Right tackle and left guard still up for competition. DJ Chester was not mentioned by Brian Kelly in that quote. Wilson Alexander from The Advocate followed up and said, hey, you didn't mention DJ. Is he still involved there? And Brian Kelly said, in some ways, we're doing a disservice to him because we've got him playing center, guard. He's playing a little bit of right tackle. He's competing for a starting position as well, but we can't put them all out there. Somebody's going to have to be in a rotational position, whether it's Paul, Cohen, DJ, Weston, Carius. Those are all guys that are going to eventually play. So, look, I generally am going to pay more attention to what we see on the field as opposed to what a coach says in a press conference. I think it's possible that Brian Kelly forgot to mention DJ Chester in that guard competition. Maybe it's not. I'm just guessing that. It happens at times. I'll put all the cards out on the table because you will probably hear this quote on Matt's show when they cut it up and play it 1 hour from right or 2 hours from right now. He called Josh Thompson by the wrong name. He called him Justin. They don't have a Justin. It's Josh. It's Thompson. He probably slammed those two together and came up with Justin. At times, players, coaches in front of a microphone, in front of cameras, will fudge a name. It happens. Sometimes you forget somebody. It happens. I do 10 hours of radio a week in front of this microphone. I forget stuff in the middle of the train of my thought all the time. It just happens. And so he may have just forgotten to say DJ Chester's name. He may be serious that Paul Mabinga and Cohen Eccles are more likely competing for that spot at guard. I've seen DJ Chester take a lot of first-team reps, so I don't necessarily believe he's completely out of the picture. But the point that Brian Kelly made today is essentially we have 3 spots nailed down. We have 4 guys between the 2 other spots, and a lot of guys are going to play. And I've seen Brad Davis do this over the course of his time at LSU. You have seen rotation at offensive line spots. Not as much last year because you really had exactly what you wanted last year. You had 4 guys who were entrenched starters, and then you put a center out there and you didn't take him off the field. But you've seen rotations. Brad Davis's first year under Brian Kelly here, 2022, you did see significant rotation. You saw guys being mixed and matched. And that happened, and it wasn't a great offensive line. Jayden Daniels kind of masked that, but it shows that they're not afraid to rotate some guys, whether that's for fresh legs, whether that's dictated by the spot in the game. If you've got a 10-point lead with 10 minutes to go in the game and you want to get a team out there that's more adept at running the football, put that guy out there. If you're down 10 with 3 minutes to go and you feel like you need to put the guy that's better at pass protection in there put him in there. Like you may have some different skill sets. I don't know what DJ Chester is better at than Cohen Eccles. I don't know what Paul Mabinga is better at than Cohen Eccles. I have no idea. I don't know what Cohen Eccles' skill set is best suited for. I've seen Cohen Eccles essentially play in half of one game, the Texas Bowl. I've seen Paul Mabinga play in 4 games. I've seen DJ Chester play center, not much guard. And again, I'm not an offensive line savant, so I couldn't tell you. I can tell you right now that Berrien Brown is faster than Kyle Parker and Nick Anderson. I can tell you right now that Nick Anderson is 6'3" and Aaron Anderson is 5'8", and they play completely different styles of football. I can tell you Jack Pyburn is a better run defender than Patrick Payton. There are skill sets on this team that I can look at a given position and go, this is what they need that guy to do. This is what this guy is better at. This competition, I can't handicap in that way. It's very difficult to evaluate individual offensive linemen in an 11-on-11 while we're at practice at field level. When they snap the ball, there is just a massive collision of like 11 guys at the line of scrimmage, and singling out 2 of them and determining how that worked out, if it's not the tackle right in front of you, is tough to do play in and play out, especially when you're trying to follow the ball and you're trying to evaluate the linebackers and you're trying to look at what's going on in the secondary and who's rotated in at safety for that snap, and there's just a lot of stuff happening. So I can't give you a perfect synopsis of what LSU looks like for the Clemson game at offensive line in terms of rotation or who the starters are. I can tell you what we see at practice. And my sincere guess, which is just that, it's an educated guess, is that Adams will be the left tackle. I think Mabenga is surging at left guard. Braylon Moore will be the center. Josh Thompson will play right guard. And I think they're testing Carius Curran with Weston Davis at right tackle. I think Weston Davis ultimately wins that job and is the first guy out there. But Brian Kelly said this today. I don't think you're going to see 5 guys trotting out here every single play. You're going to see some other guys definitely getting into the game as well. So I think you might see 6 or 7 offensive linemen against Clemson. I'm basing this on what we've seen at practice, which is rotation, and what Brian Kelly is saying in the press conference. I don't have any other information to go off of. It seems like a pretty reasonable conclusion to draw. I think you have unproven players, competition at different places, and ultimately they're going to need to see some game reps. And this is why I would really like to play Clemson in week 2 or 3. But you're not. You're playing them in week 1. And this is what we've talked about all summer long with trying to get ready for that first game. You want to set your depth chart and get moving. And unfortunately for LSU at this point, based on what we're seeing at practice and what we're hearing from Brian Kelly in the press conferences, it's not settled at offensive line. They're still looking at things, and you're 11 games from kickoff. And oh, by the way, Clemson might have 2 top 10 picks on the defensive front. So it's not ideal. It's not a disaster. It's just unsettled at this point. We'll see what LSU can come up with in the next 11 days. And I'm endlessly fascinated with what we see on Saturday night inside Tiger Stadium at 7:30 when we're going to be able to watch them practice and I would assume run a number of plays. Who's out there on the offensive line and how do they look? I'll tell you this. I will have a better sense of what that offensive line looks like from that vantage point. Me personally, again, not an offensive line savant. Nobody's ever asked me to coach or evaluate offensive linemen, but I'll have a better vantage point of who's playing well and where pressures are coming from the press box seat that we have up above at film level than I will on field level 15 yards from the line of scrimmage with a mass of humanity crashing into each other. It's just an easier vantage point for us. I think you'll get a better read from the media on how the offensive line plays on Saturday than you will have really from any practice thus far that we've been able to watch. So we'll tell you. We'll talk about it on Monday's show for sure, and we'll write it up Saturday night on LouisianaSports.net as well. Looking forward to getting inside Tiger Stadium for the first time since LSU Oklahoma last year. Did I go to the spring game? I did go to the spring game. Forgot. That's how impactful I think the spring game is. But nice to get inside Tiger Stadium this coming Saturday. Looking forward to that. That's our Genesis opening drive here on this Tuesday. We will step aside. I want to talk about 2 former LSU Heisman winners that have big seasons ahead. Let's talk about that next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com is that website. Jonathan Carpenter's team, they're experts when it comes to the tactical side of insurance. That's how they win clients. That's how they retain clients. That's how they build relationships because they're great at identifying issues with insurance programs and fixing them. The worst thing that can happen if you're a business owner with your insurance is to spend a significant amount of money on premium, have a hole in your policy, whether that's an exclusion or an oversight, and then have an uncovered loss that you then have to pay on top of your premium. That's the worst thing that can happen. They can't control hurricanes at the Highland Insurance Group. They can't control car accidents at the Highland Insurance Group. They can't control lawsuits. What they can control is what your insurance policy does and the way it responds. If you want to be sure that your insurance program is up to par with what you're paying for, contact the Highland Insurance Group and have them audit it for free. They'll do it for free. They'll tell you what they find. If there are significant issues, move to them. They're right here in Baton Rouge. They can help you out statewide. You can find them online at HighlandIG.com. Insurance is never the most fun thing to talk about. It can be very, very, very important. And you never know when. It's the Highland Insurance Group. Check them out online. HighlandIG.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
We'll chat with Glen West, senior writer at Go 24/7, coming up here in 15 minutes. Our Tuesday show is brought to you by Daryl May of Trusty Properties. If you're looking for some land outside the city, whether that's for hunting property, whether that's for agriculture, whether that's for a secondary home, or whether you're just ready to get out of the hustle and bustle and put your roots down somewhere outside the city, Daryl May can help you do that. He's a guy who has done that himself. From Baton Rouge, Catholic high grad, now calls St. Francisville home. Wanted a little bit more space. If you're like Daryl, let Daryl help you. He's happy to do that, whether that's in Louisiana, in the Felicianas, in Point Capee, wherever the case may be, or up in Mississippi, in Woodville, or anywhere up towards Natchez as well. Daryl May can help you out with that. Trusty Properties is a name you can trust. We bring you our Tuesday shows each and every week here on the Hunt Palmer Show. Cranked up the old television last night, and I don't know that I realized that Washington and Cincinnati were playing on quote-unquote Monday Night Football. And Joe and Jayden both got out there and played, and they both played pretty well. Joe led a couple touchdown drives. Jayden led a touchdown drive on the only drive that he played, ran it in from about 15 yards out, showing that athleticism. And then Lisa Salter said, "Why didn't you just get down?" And Jayden goes, I wanted to score. And I get that. It's been interesting to watch the Bengals in preseason because quarterbacks at Joe Burrow's level don't play in the preseason. Except they do now when they're Joe Burrow, because the Bengals start every single season 1-4, 0-3, 1-2, 1-4. It's just every year they get off to a terrible start. They seemingly always drop a stinker to Cleveland. Last year they inexplicably lost a home game to New England, which knocked me out of Survivor in week 1. And so Zach Taylor's looking at this going, we got to change something. You got to play in the preseason. I looked up, they were almost at the end of the first quarter, and Jamar Chase is out there running routes. And you know what? I'm fine with it. Find a way to get things moving, because the situation has not been that the Bengals have been a bad team in any of these Joe Burrow years that have resulted in the playoffs being missed. He got hurt his rookie year. He got hurt 2 years ago. But they're getting off to such bad starts that when they play 8-4 football down the stretch, it's not enough. And they've got to figure out a way to get things started a little bit more quickly, because the AFC is not getting any softer. The Bills are going to be good. Baltimore is going to be good. The Chiefs, probably going to be pretty good. So they've got to find a way to keep pace with those teams early in the year. So I like the fact that they're playing a good bit. You look at the way the Bengals start this year. They start on the road at Cleveland. They should win that game. They should not be losing, even with a good defense on the road, to Joe Flacco in Cleveland. Cincinnati should go win that game. Then they play Jacksonville in Cincinnati. That's a game they should win. Then they're at Minnesota. J.J. McCarthy's there. It's not Kirk Cousins anymore. What do we know? I feel like they've got a roster that can go win that game. Then you're at Denver, which is going to be difficult. Then you got Detroit and at Green Bay. And all of a sudden, with Pittsburgh, it's going to get tough. They need to get off to a decent start. And so I'm for the Bengals cranking things up with their starters in the preseason. This is a big year for Joe, because he still absolutely gets put in that category of the elite quarterbacks. And so does Josh Allen. He hadn't played in the Super Bowl, and Joe has. But you got Mahomes, and you've got Allen, and you've got Lamar, who is still as good a quarterback as there is in the league, coming off an MVP year. Does Joe need to do something besides go 8-8 to keep his footing there? I personally, out of a selfish, January is not a lot of fun around here, a lot. Football's over for LSU. Baseball's still 5 weeks away. I kind of like my weekends to have some Bengals football in them. I don't think the Saints are going to be occupying any of my January. I'd like Joe to do that. They need to get off to a better start. And now you got an insurance policy with Joe. Jayden now has to follow up where he was the toast of the NFL last year with another great season. And you've got some disgruntled folks over there in Washington. You've got Terry McLaurin, who's cranky, and that's understandable. And Brian Robinson's apparently on the trading block as well. And it's a tough spot for the Redskins. I shouldn't say tough spot. It's a tough look for them to not be paying some folks when you realize that you're still not paying Jayden Daniels for 3 more years. You've got him on the rookie deal. Splurge a little bit on some of these skill guys. Keep them happy while Jayden's cheap, because we know that once the price tag goes through the roof, which it will on Jayden at some point, you're going to have to make some difficult decisions. And Cincinnati's finding that out right now with Trey Hendrickson. I think they made a bad decision with T. Higgins, but whatever. That's their decision. With Jayden on the cheap, you've got to pay some guys. And I'm confident that Jayden Daniels is going to rise to the occasion this year. There were no expectations on him last year. There are now massive expectations on him. And I think he's built for that kind of thing. Y'all watched him here. Y'all saw his temperament. It never changes. It doesn't change if it's 4th and 7 in a huge game. It doesn't change if he's got Heisman hopes on his back. It doesn't change if he's playing in the NFL playoffs. Like, all of that stuff, he's just handled in stride. He never looks sped up. He never looks like he's moving too fast. He rarely makes a decision that's even questionable. And his efficiency is just remarkable. And it was the same thing we saw in Baton Rouge that just immediately transferred to the NFL. It was just immediate. He was comfortable. He looked it, at least. We didn't think Washington's roster was great last year, and he kind of drug it. And then they went out this past offseason because they had salary cap room and made some moves. And you feel like things are changing there in Washington. With Dan Snyder out as the owner, you got an ownership group that people like, to use a pretty blunt term. And then you've got a head coach who's got some skins on the wall in the NFL, who's a great defensive mind. You've got Cliff Kingsbury refreshed after some time away and enjoying calling plays for a young dynamic quarterback. Like, there's so many things to like about what's going on in Washington. And to me, as an LSU guy who's not fully a Saints guy, I want them to win, but I don't lose a lot of sleep over it. I enjoy having these two guys in my world on Sundays. Like, I've never really had that. If y'all are unfamiliar in any way with my NFL upbringing, like, I was a Cowboys fan while they were killing people in the 90s. And then they got Quincy Carter, and I was in like 5th grade, and I just completely dropped it. It just gone. And I've watched the NFL mindlessly and heartlessly, honestly. There just hasn't been any pull at all for 20 years. And now, with these two Heisman winners who I watched and covered on the pre- and post-game show, it's changed my Sundays. And I think it's really, really cool that one's in the NFC, one's in the AFC. And yeah, with the Saints in a full-on rebuild, these two guys give me some juice on Sundays. And it was cool to watch them out there last night. I retweeted a Bengals tweet that had those two dapping it up after the game was over. And I think both are primed for a huge year. And I think both teams are threats to win their division. I think both teams are threats to make the playoffs. I think both teams are threats to make a push in their conference. Do I think the Bills are probably better than the Bengals? Yeah. Do I think the Chiefs are going to be tough to unseat for the Bengals? Yeah. Do I think the Ravens are every bit as good, if not better, than the Bengals? Yeah. Do I think Joe gives the Bengals a chance every Sunday and they can make the Super Bowl? Yeah, I do. They got to get better on defense, definitely. But he's that good. Jamar's that good. Their offensive line didn't look great last night. We'll see. But with Jayden, like, do I think the Eagles are better? Yeah. Do I think he can make up for that? Yeah. I think they can play with Detroit. I think San Francisco takes a step back. I don't trust anybody in the South. That includes Tampa. Like, I think that these two quarterbacks, these two LSU guys, give you a shot. And if you're a South Louisiana fan who's a diehard Saints fan that's feeling like this may not be a great fall to watch the Hoodats, that sucks. I get it. But maybe this is just a little bit of a... It doesn't make up for it if you're a diehard Saints fan. I would never even attempt to insinuate that. It is not the same. But if you're looking for an alternative, after the Saints are over, what can I watch to cheer me up after this loss? These two guys might be the guys if you're a diehard LSU fan as well. Good to see those guys on national TV, and I think I realize it's a preseason game, and I'm not going to read too much into a preseason television decision, but I think you're going to see a lot of these guys in the years to come in prime time because they're a huge TV draw. And again, this is another piece to the puzzle with LSU where I talk about this ridiculous heater that LSU is on with national exposure all across the platforms of sports, whether it's the WNBA or the Major League Baseball or the MLB draft or winning national championships or whatever the case may be. Like, this is just another piece to that. And I think the reason these two teams played in week 2 of the preseason, where you figured you would probably get both of these quarterbacks out there for a short period of time, that's a decision made based on their star power. And I think that's very, very cool. I think that's a hat tip to LSU as well. So cool to see Joe and Jayden. Hope they have monster years coming up this fall. Let's transition to LSU football. We'll talk to Glen West, senior writer at Go 24/7, when we come back.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Tuesday shows brought to you by Daryl May, Trusty Properties, licensed realtor in Louisiana and Mississippi. Daryl May with Trusty Properties is a name you can trust. Got to the Gems Firearms Hotline. Glen West, senior writer over at Go 24/7, giving us a little time here on this Tuesday as he does. Glenn, how are you?
Doing well, Hunt. Just was going to ask you, are there any championships you want to claim? Any extra rings out there that are up for grabs?
My intramural basketball championship is cemented in LSU UREC lore. I don't have to go back and change that. We won that one on the floor. Auburn is a little pitiful. We'll talk about that later on in this hour. I'm curious. You listened to Brian Kelly today, and you heard him talk about the offensive line. I went through it in my first segment. They're talking about competition at right tackle, competition at left guard. What do you read into his comments, understanding what you have watched on the practice field?
Yeah, I think, look, I think you got to take everything with a grain of salt, because I do think that there are some open competitions that are still going on at left guard and at right tackle. It does sound like, Tyree Adams, Braylon Moore, Josh Thompson, that group of three right there is pretty set in the starting lineup. But I honestly thought that one of the more interesting phrase or ways he put it today was that at left guard, sounds like Paul Mubanga and Cohen Eccles are the two favorites right now at that job. And we asked a follow up a little bit later in the press conference about DJ Chester, and he said he's still competing at that left guard spot, but they also got him playing at center. They got him playing a little right tackle, and so I think this is still very much up in the air between a group of about 5 or 6 players to get those last 2 spots. And so we walked out there for practice on Monday, and we saw Paul Mubanga with the first team at left guard, and we saw Karius Kern at right tackle with the first team. Couple periods in, Weston Davis was getting some first team reps at right tackle as we were walking out. And it looked like he was going to be kind of in that rotation. So I think that there's that grouping of players there that they're still trying to figure out who the best are that's going to play there to at least start the season. And really, I think probably the more important part of this or the more important piece of this is that, BK said in one of his last, kind of answers to that question was that all these guys are going to play for us. I think there's some truth to that. I think that they're going to have a pretty consistent rotation at those 2 spots with a number of guys, 5 or 6, that are going to be rotating in at the beginning of the season and seeing which ones stick by, I guess the middle part of the year.
Do you consider that concerning or just normal training camp stuff?
It's not ideal. I mean, I think probably the first part of the first couple weeks, what I really liked about the offensive line, despite it not going, or despite some of its struggles, was that they had settled on a 5. There was a very consistent 5 for the first 2 or 3 weeks of camp. And my whole thing was just give those guys more reps and more time together on the field and see what it looks like. But obviously LSU's gotten to a point here where they want to, mix things up and get, a couple guys into the mix here, or add a couple guys that were rotating in to be those, to see what they look like next to those other starters. So I guess that's my way of saying that not really, but you also can't really, if LSU doesn't feel like that they have those positions settled, the best course of action is to get as many guys in there as possible between now and Clemson to see which ones work the best.
I wouldn't consider the defensive line a spot where you really care about starters. That's going to rotate no matter what. So if you take defensive line out of it and then you look at the offensive line, do you feel like there are any other position battles of note that are not decided as game week approaches?
Not really. Like, I think there's going to be a very consistent rotation at wide receiver. I think, obviously running back and tight ends are pretty settled. Who's going to play at those spots. I think really the one other position other than the offensive line, maybe going into last week that you still kind of felt like was maybe a little up in the air was safety. But I think Tamarcus Cooley and AJ Halsey are going to be your two safeties against Clemson. That's been a very consistent rotation. At cornerback, I think you're going to see Monsieur Delane, and then a combination of Ashton Stamps and PJ Woodland, maybe a little DJ Pickett or Jakeem Jackson somewhere in there as well. But I feel like they have kind of the grouping of players everywhere else that are going to play and play a lot in that Clemson game. Outside of the offensive line, that still remains a little bit unsettled with left guard and right tackle.
If I gave you a free $5 bet on who plays more snaps against Clemson, Ashton Stamps or PJ Woodland, what would you say?
I would still probably lean Ashton Stamps. I think PJ Woodland's been the bigger playmaker to this point in camp. I think he's been one of the better playmakers in the entire secondary. But I do think Ashton Stamps has the experience on his side. I have seen some strides from him from a development standpoint here in year 3. He's very confident. I mean, we talked to him last week or 2 weeks ago, and this is a guy who's very very sure of himself and very sure that he can play at this level and be a really good experienced piece for LSU in that defensive backfield. So I would probably lean towards Ashton Stamps. He's the one that's been getting the most first team reps opposite of Delane, but certainly not counting out PJ Woodland having a major role in that game as well.
What about Xavier Thomas's role? We've seen him a lot.
Yeah, I went down a list of a player that has improved the most throughout the course of fall camp for a piece over at our site this morning, and Xavier was the guy that I pegged as the wide receiver because I've really liked what I've seen from him the last couple weeks. He's making all the catches. He's really improving his route running as well. Like, he's just getting open all the time, and Nussmeier and those guys are finding him in the middle of the field. And I think kind of the stigma coming in with him was that he was just going to be kind of a gadget guy, somebody that you could get the ball to in the backfield for a couple touches or maybe a couple screens and see what he can make of it. But I really think he can be a decent part of this passing game, and just going to be about how you rotate those 6 guys in, because there's really been a myriad of players that are getting around the same kind of targets from Nussmeier in this passing offense, which is a good problem to have. But Xavier is certainly, I think, going to be in that mix, and certainly a lethal weapon in the return game as well. So I've really liked what I've seen from him this camp. I think he's really developed from last year.
You have an inkling of who the punt returner might be? I know they send the same 5 guys back there. Only one's going to be back there in the game. Who do you think it'll be? Who would you put back there?
I think it'll be Xavier, and I would probably put Xavier back there too. I mean, he's proven that he can be a really special punt returner, and I think probably the thing that LSU really needs more than anything is just the pieces around him to fit in that return game. I think last year there just weren't a whole lot of avenues or a lot of ways for him to have success in the punt return game. And I think every time, or most of the times that we've been out there, we've seen a lot of punt coverage work going on with the special teams when they have gone onto those periods. And so I think opening up those holes for him and giving him ways and avenues to be a little bit more explosive in the return game will really open him up and be a game changer for LSU this year if they're able to capitalize on it.
Next Tuesday, we'll be talking Clemson, so let's talk a little bigger picture here. How do you feel about it? If you want to give a record prediction or kind of what you're maybe something that, well, let's start there. How do you feel about the season? Is there a record prediction that you have at this point?
Yeah, I'm kind of going back and forth between a couple of record predictions. I don't want to put anything on the spot quite yet, but I do like this team as a whole. Like, I think the one thing that you can say is that the depth and the talent is much improved from any previous Brian Kelly team that we've had or that LSU's had over the last couple of years. Like, they should be able to compete in every single game, and they're very capable of winning every single game on their schedule. But you and I talked about it last week. I mean, the schedule is brutal. I mean, it's a really, really difficult schedule. I think I heard you mention that there are about 4 or 5 games in that 3 to 7 range of your rankings of the kind of difficulty that you could put any of them in any spot and it wouldn't be the wrong answer. So I think that just tells you just how difficult the schedule is going to be. But at the same time, this roster was built to handle a schedule like this. And so there really are no excuses whether there's injuries, there should be a next man up at most of these positions. So I feel like the depth and the quality of talent is as good as it's been. But there's always going to be that hesitancy when it comes to this team and winning those tight games, winning those big games on a consistent basis. So I think right now I probably have this as a two-loss team. That's kind of my prediction right now. I guess I gave you my prediction there to kind of round out my answer. But yes, 10-2 is kind of where I'm leaning right now with this group, which puts them right in the middle of that college football playoff. And certainly, then the question becomes whether or not you're going on the road to a team or you're hosting or, what happens there. But I think that's probably where I'm leaning right now.
Do you feel better about the offense or the defense?
I feel better about this defense. I mean, I'm not sure that that's something that I would have said 2-3 months ago. Like I've been very impressed by how consistently aggressive that group has been and how many guys that they're rotating in and out who are all performing pretty well. Another couple of guys that I mentioned in that piece that I just talked about were Tylen Singleton at linebacker, were DJ Pickett at cornerback. Like there's a number of different guys that I think that might not even be starters, but who could be contributing role players on this team that can go out and make plays for you on the defensive side of the ball. And that's just not something that we've had at LSU here for the last really 5 or 6 years, ever since the championship team. There hasn't been that quality of depth that they've had on that side of the ball. So I think the offense long-term is going to be great. I think that they have so many explosive weapons on that side of the ball that it's kind of hard not to be a really good offense, but it's just the short term here. How do they get all those pieces working together is going to be the biggest question for me. And that starts obviously up front with the offensive line. Here's
a pretty irrelevant question, but one I'm curious to your answer on personally. Like, what do you make of us getting to see the team 7 days before kickoff in Tiger Stadium? That's, to me, unprecedented. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I was planning on going home to New Orleans one last time this weekend, and I had to scrap those plans because I think that tells me that Brian Kelly's very confident in the group that he has. I mean, you're right. I mean, just not even this upcoming weekend, but just the access that the media has had throughout the entirety of fall camp has been unlike anything I've been around since covering the team in 2016, 2017 when I first started as a student. So I think that's a good sign. If you're a fan out there and you want all the intel and all the analysis, I think it's really good to kind of get an inkling of what this group looks like going into the season. And, we're not out there breaking formations or breaking play calls or anything like that. We're just telling you who looks good and what needs to be improved. And I think that that's something that they've that we should all be really appreciative and grateful of, that they've opened up for us here in the first, this first fall camp.
We'll see you Saturday night.
All right. See you, Hunt.
Glen West, senior writer, Go 24/7 team coverage, recruiting coverage. If you're looking forward, they got you covered over there at Go 24/7. Glenn, give us a little bit of time here every single Tuesday. We'll talk Alabama Crimson Tide. What's new in Tuscaloosa? We'll do that in 15 minutes. Closing out hour number 1 coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge. GenesisofBatonRouge.com is the website. Every car that's on the lot is online at GenesisofBatonRouge.com. My favorite model that they have is the GV80. It's their midsize SUV. Kind of fits what the Palmer family would fit in there with two young kiddos. If you're in a similar situation and you're looking for a new vehicle, Genesis needs to be on your list. Go by and see them, Airline Highway at Pico. If you're buying a new vehicle in Baton Rouge, you're probably going to be on Airline anyway. There's a lot of car dealerships there. Make one more stop at Genesis. See the line. Work with their incredible sales team. Experience the ambiance, the staff, the customer service, and all that comes with buying a Genesis. Speaking of that, America's Best Warranty comes with buying a Genesis. You're talking about 100,000 miles on your limited powertrain warranty. You're talking about a new vehicle bumper-to-bumper warranty, 5 years, 60,000 miles. You're talking about enhanced roadside assistance 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, complimentary scheduled maintenance. All that comes with your new purchase at Genesis of Baton Rouge. Go by and see them, Airline at Pico. Find the entire inventory online at GenesisofBatonRouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
So yesterday, you may have heard, I threw some bouquets at Auburn doing the right thing, retiring Cam Newton's jersey. I talked about how Cam is one of the best players I've ever watched with my own two eyes and absolutely deserving of that honor on the Plains. And today, Auburn did something else. They announced to everyone, hey, hope you're listening. Here's a press release. We just claimed 4 more national championships. We now have 9. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. Where it starts, and the root of this, is actually not with Auburn. Where it starts is college football's inherent flaw for decades and decades and decades, where you just kind of pulled a national champion out of thin air. Alabama claims one where they lost like 3 or 4 games or something. It's a flawed world that we lived in for a very, very long time, where everybody kind of plays separately, and then we get a group together and they go, okay, you're the champ. And we did that for a very long time, and we've addressed it. We addressed it with the BCS and addressed it with the 4-team playoff and addressed it with the 12-team playoff, and the playoff will grow, and there will be an opportunity, and you'll have your one-name national champion, and no one will have to play these games anymore. But my contention is that championships are won in the moment. I'm very, very fortunate. I was in the Superdome when LSU beat Oklahoma to win a national championship in January of 2004. I was a student in 2007, 2008 when they beat Ohio State. I was doing the pre- and post-game show and was in the Dome for 2019, 2020 against Clemson. I was in Omaha in 2023 with my dad. I was there for LouisianaSports.net in 2025. I've watched LSU win national championships. I could still walk to the exact bar stool I was sitting at walk-ons when the Cubs won the World Series in 2016. And those moments in time are what make a national championship great. Being able to experience that season, the ride up to it, whether it's in football with the SC championship and now playoff games and winning the national championship, in baseball, the regional and the super in Omaha and the whole thing. And everybody can remember, just what they were doing when LSU was playing nightly in 2023 after they lost the game to Wake Forest, and that journey and that moment where it ends. That's where the national championship and the championship essence is for the fans and the players as well. And I've said this many times, you could go back right now and tell me that LSU has vacated every national championship they've ever won. You got to take all the flags down. You got to tear the Intimidator down. And it wouldn't bother me at all because I was there and I watched all of it. And I experienced in the moment, oftentimes with people that I love, like that's the beauty of a championship. And so to take it away at this point wouldn't mean anything to me. And to give it at this point doesn't mean anything. If Auburn feels like they're doing the right thing and that the people who were associated with the 2004 undefeated Auburn team are somehow now more validated than ever by the fact that they've put flags up in the stadium, fine. You're not going to offend anybody. You're not going to offend me. But it seems silly, and that's the word I would use. I wouldn't use stupid. I wouldn't use fake. I would use silly. It's silly to stand up on your soapbox on your table and yell, hey, we're the champions from 20 years ago. Hey, we're the champions in some cases in these 4 titles 60 years ago. Respect us. Like that's silly. It's silly. That 2004 Auburn team certainly has amazing memories of winning all those games together. I'm sure they still have bitter memories of finding out that they weren't going to get to play for the title. It was going to be USC and it was going to be Oklahoma. That's bitter. And you saw USC just dispatch Oklahoma, and that's probably bitter when you feel like you could have put up a better fight. But the fact of the matter is that we put rules in place for the BCS. We determined how we were going to crown a champion, and we did that, and you weren't in. So I'm not going to run to Auburn and Harvey Updike style burn the flags that they hang. I'm not going to really comment further on any banners they put up, and I'm not going to tell the 2004 Auburn team if they get new rings made that they need to pawn those. Like, I don't care, but it's silly. And it to me is all about in the moment. And the moment has passed for those teams. So to come back and yell from the rooftops and make a deal and a spectacle out of the fact that you feel like you've been shorted 4 championships is silly. And what you're really doing is getting in bed with Alabama, because you've undoubtedly made fun of Alabama for doing the same thing for decades. And isn't that the exact antithesis of what you want to be as Auburn? Again, I'm here in Baton Rouge. I don't give a rip what they do. They can claim the 2019 national championship for all I care. I watched the real ones, and I'll celebrate that. They can do whatever they want. But it's silly. And I think the people in power that made the decision are doing something silly. That's my take on Auburn claiming extra national championships. 9-time champions on the Plains. Put some respect on their name. That's it for hour number 1. You missed any of it, catch it on demand. Talked a lot of LSU football, offensive line in the first segment. Then we chatted with Glen West as well. We'll talk some Alabama football after SportsCenter as we pause for national headlines. If you missed any of the first hour, search Hunt Palmer Show, like, subscribe, rate, and review. Hunt on LSU, where you can find all of our LSU content. We're back with hour number 2 on a Tuesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.